It's June 18th at 5:01. I'd like to call this meeting of the Woodstock Village Board of Trustees to order.
And I'd like to call the select board to order on June 18th at 5 o'clock.
The first item on our agenda is additions and deletions from the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions? Trustees? Okay, then we'll move on to citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments in the room? Are there any citizen comments online? Seeing as how there are none, let's move on to presentations. Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so after the presentation last week, the boards wanted the department head to come and kind of speak quickly about their departments, the personnel policy, some challenges and goals for the next year. So we have department heads here now. We are on a time constraint. We have a select board meeting at 6. We currently have 6 department heads in here, talking about less than 10 minutes per person. So I asked them to speak to up to about 5 minutes and leave a few minutes of questions from the boards. The boards will be meeting a lot more often, joint meetings in the coming weeks and months. So if there are more information you want from a board member, department head, specifically, I think we're gonna ask them back in those meetings, some of goals and objectives. It'd be a good time to have them come back and go more into depth with some of their asks at that time too. So with that said, I put together a quick list. I was gonna have fire go first. There's no objections. Chief Green? Yes.
Consider
At the podium, please.
Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm David. David, Chief of Fire. All right.
You don't look the same. Your hair.
Do you really have to talk about it on camera? All right, so my goals for this year, and I'll do the personnel policy at the end, but ongoing as always is recruitment and retention of employees. We've lost a lot of part-timers this year, and we've lost quite a few full-timers this year. And I don't know if the boards are aware, but for every part-timer and full-timer, I make an investment of roughly $10,000 initially upfront per person. And there's no getting around that. That is just for safety gear and all that stuff. So I'd like to stop turning these people over, and hopefully we can come up with a solution in the near future and economy gets a little better and housing and people want to move here and work in, I'd say, lower middle class jobs. So, the select board, I'll be coming to you in the next few months, but we are due for a fire truck and we have some decisions to make in the very near future on that. Any fire truck right now that is purchased today is 4 to 5 years away from delivery. And ambulances, just so you know, are 3 to 4 years away. So we really need to plan for that, especially if something catastrophic happens and it's going to take $500,000 to fix a truck when we have a new one on order that we've already paid for. We may be in serious trouble. So we really need to get our fleet going as much as we can.
Clarification, do we pay when the
Vehicle arrives,
not when we order it?
I'm sure they'd be happy with us paying up front. That is something we can discuss. Another thing we're working on in this year's goal is the state of Vermont rolled out software for dispatching for police and fire, and it is not working for the fire department. So we're investigating new software, fairly minimal cost because we already have some of the modules, but it's a recurring fee, and I hate recurring fees. I wish we could just purchase it, but we're investigating that and may pull the trigger on that this next spring.
Is that something that we paid for and then it didn't work, or is that something?
No, so this, I don't know what the state of Vermont charges.
It's free because state for us. We're gonna go there.
That will be bleeped out on the recording for all you state people.
Okay, so the thing that doesn't work, we did not pay for it.
We did not pay for
Okay,
it.
good.
It's a statewide system that is used by every department except for Hartford, because they use a better system.
And let's see, we are hopeful to get a dry hydrant maybe this fall or early spring up in the Long Hill area, which lacks some accessibility to water year round up there. So that's in the progress and moving forward nicely right now. We'll see how it really plays out. How much time do I have left?
Very simple.
Okay. Personnel policy, I've read it. I really don't have any major issues with it. Some of it is very nice and generous to the employees, but in my mind, you do have to remember that every action has a reaction. So if I give more holidays and more personal time, that means I have to call people in for more overtime, which is an associated cost maybe you haven't thought about. While I'm all for making our employees happy, we have to do what's also best for the town of Woodstock and the taxpayers, and in my mind, public safety. So other than that, I think it's a fairly decent personnel policy. So.
Questions on the boards?
I do. Wondering what, I assume that pay is kind of is maybe the main obstacle for retention. Have you done benchmarking to see where we are compared to like nearby communities, if that's who we're losing firefighters to?
I have. Let me give you just a whisker of backstory. These guys will be quick, so I can eat up some of their time.
The goal is to go first and quick to gain some time
Yeah,
like everyone else.
So in 2019, we were ahead of the curve, and COVID hit, and it really changed the market of personnel and also emergency personnel, because a lot of the older people that had tenure in these departments scattered and left a lot of young people, and it's really hard to attract those people to this area. As of today, I can tell you that 2 towns on either side of us, our highest starting position is not even close. Killington is hiring 6 people this summer, starting at $25.16 an hour. Our starting pay is $18 an hour. So we've got some work to do.
Contract up. Contract up this year.
Next summer. Yes.
So we've been negotiating this year after July 1.
Yep. So unfortunately, it does come down to the dollar. And in my mind, I'd really like to make it, and I know this is very difficult, don't shoot the messenger, but to attract people to live in this community. And that would be the biggest single benefit to us. And even at $25.16, it's not going to happen. We all know that. So I know there's a housing thing and it's being worked on, but it really goes hand in hand in my mind.
Is housing part of it, as far as losing people?
Well, no, not really. No, but I'd like to get people to move into the community, to buy into our community, be a part of it, rather than just take our money and leave, if you will. It's not the politest way to say that, but you understand what I'm saying.
Well, there's also a benefit to having them be proximal to it.
Yes,
You know,
Yeah,
not having to drive long distances.
correct. I have people that live 2 hours away, and so they do their, 24-hour shift and go.
2 hours away.
Yeah.
I had a question about the software. Is it not working because it's crap software? Like what's the,
I'll let Beth speak for that.
okay,
In my mind, yes.
okay.
Oh, if we could just wait, she'll be speaking for dispatch later. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Getting ahead.
Our records, mainly fire and EMS, we get FOIA requests all the time, and no fault of dispatch, but our data's off, the times are off, and it's a legal document.
Yeah.
And we really need things to be in
Precise.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Are there any other things you think can gain the fire department over the years, either through staff or technology that we haven't investigated?
None that I can think of. A full-time billing person that maybe, or maybe not, more part-time, let's say, that can do more calling of trying to get people to pay up. And we're lacking a little bit there because we only have a part-timer for about 10, 12 hours a week.
Okay.
And I don't have the time for it. And it's not a fun job, so, yeah.
And I think too, you'll be asking maybe the next budget season to add 2 full-time employees to offset part-time employees.
I wasn't gonna open that can of.
Out of
But that would
But
be
yes,
down the road, yeah.
that is one of our plans, and looking at what we pay part-timers versus overtime and money we've lost from part-timers, it's not a huge gap monetarily that we'll have to fill. So in my mind, it makes good sense. So, but surprise.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
The safety equipment you give to one person when they leave, can you reuse any of it to another person? Or
Trust me, we try.
no?
We try, but it is tailor-made to very specific requirements. So if your arm and my arm are 2 inches different, doesn't work. And they can't be altered once they're made.
Gotta hire someone that's the same size.
Yeah, we may go to jail for that if we start doing that. Say you can only be 5'4" and 32 inch.
What happens to that equipment?
We sit it for part-timers because part-timers, I typically give used gear until I know they're going to stick around and become an investment within the community and want to work long-term. But if I send them to classes, I have to have the right fitting, right in date gear and stuff like that.
But is it possible to, is there a market to resell that, or is it just?
Not really.
No.
Because it's so tailor-made.
Okay.
And once you use it for one fire, nobody's going to buy it from you because of the chemicals and the off-gassing and all that stuff. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks, chief. Police?
So
Please
here,
don't, please go under that.
I have a lot of repetition, I think. But yeah, the policy, I think, is a good stepping stone. The proposed policy is a good stepping stone for recruitment and retention. I think it's pretty good, and I support the policy. As far as our department and our community, we're 6 full-time officers, which is, for our size community, is and doing 24-hour coverage both in the village and the town, is pretty bare bones. Holden, Maine, which is up north, is 3,200 year-round residents with similar traffic levels, and there are 7 full-time officers. I don't think they get the same tourism. Not really sure, but I think we would be at 7 to 9 if we were to do a study. As a recommended staffing for full-time equivalent officers. Housing is an issue. I have 2 officers that are looking for housing, that are checking apartments, and the lower and lowest apartments are above their budget. So our union contract is pretty recent and caught up close to, but has now been left behind in the gear since it's been signed pretty significantly. As Dave said, turnover is expensive, but at least on our end, polyester is cheaper than fire gear. But looking at the budget, after you take away employer paid benefits, salaries and wages and stipends, we're running the police department on $74,000 for the entire year for equipment, for rubbish, for vehicles, for fuel, for everything. So $74,000 is pretty tight. I don't think I run my household on that when you start to look at everything that we spend day to day. But for example, we use a body camera line item with a placeholder of $100, but if I go online and buy the same camera we used, it's $700. So we budget for 1/7 of a body camera. If we look at the body camera that I think we should go to, which has cloud service, it's $50,000 for all our body cameras. Financeable, there's grants available, but we're looking at $100 and $50,000. And that can be spread over 5 years, so it's $100 to maybe $10,000. But there's pretty big disparity in what we're budgeting and what we need. And yeah, Valcor is not a good program. We are exploring what, the licensing that, Hartford uses and joining with them, but I haven't seen any numbers yet. I expect it's probably not gonna fall on our priority at this point in time, just because there's so many expenses, but it is something that I'm curious about. Are there any questions?
How many part-times?
We have 7 part-time, 2 of them live very out of state, so they'll work for a week or 2 when they're in town. So I have 1 officer who lives in South Carolina that's in town now, so he is working a couple shifts this week and helping us cover, but basically, I would say about 5 part-time officers that are,
Full-time, part-time.
yes, kind of, yeah, we have a Josh, yeah. And Larry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have 2 that we use regularly, and then some that we use intermittently, and 2 that live out of state.
In terms of like where our needs are as a community, where are there any other places besides like staffing you think the department could be like is mismatched right now? Whether that's like, I guess like if there's like a seasonality with like how busy the force is,
Mhm.
or if there are calls of a specific kind that you think maybe could be solved a different way, if there's like any diversion.
Yeah, our seasonality is, I would say like June through October, getting busier and busier, but still busy enough in the winter that, it doesn't drop off completely but you know, in Southern Maine, you have summer officers or seasonal officers, and, they have a whole different structure for their training and their requirements for summer work that Vermont does, so that the onboarding for someone to work for 9 months would be too expensive and too time delayed. It takes about 4 months minimum from start to finish, even for a part-time officer.
Any, trainings for yourself or anybody else on the force that you're looking at for the next year?
We have, depending on scheduling and how the calendar will fall, we have 1 or 2 officers that will attend the full-time academy in the next cycle or 2, to the tune of, I think, about 30 grand each.
Those are current part-time?
They're current full-time employees
Okay.
that will attend the next level of training.
And that's
and-
30 each?
Yeah. Which means we're trying to backfill their shift with part-time officers and overtime, plus pay their salary that gets you know, we're paying 30 grand to training, saving 30 grand on patrol, but then spending additional money either to part-time or overtime to backfill those shifts. So it's basically double pay. I have some training. I have a conference in October. It's in Boston. It's just a couple days. There's a training that it's a 3-week class at Roger Williams University for supervisor training for the sergeant to attend. I haven't seen what's been scheduled, but it's a very good class and it'd be very worthwhile. So that's something I'm going to be looking into.
Is there any other continuing education? So I assume that with officers, you have to take.
Yeah, we have 30 minimum required every year for any given officer, which most people are going to be 40 to 60 without even trying.
I have a question. Hi, if you notice me, there's a,
I can see you.
yeah, no, there's a biplane circling around, which is why I'm not really paying attention. So I spoke to your sergeant this last week, and he told me about the possibility of a grant to look into electric bicycle to add to your department. And I'm wondering, do you think this is a good fit for us? I know he has to be trained, but I'm thinking during foliage, when a police car can't get to the center of the village, how do you feel about that?
He and I have talked about it, and we've put in for a grant for it on Governor's Highway Safety. I feel that is pretty likely to be given. Once it's granted, though, I do have to do a study, which is, I think, somewhat informal, to calculate the use of highway safety versus the use of the bicycle for like responding to assist on an ambulance call or responding to a non-highway call for service. So it'd be pretty high percentage, probably 80 or 90% covered. If given, but
So do you feel it's a good option, another option?
I think it's
to help with
fantastic.
Foliage?
Yeah, I think it'd be excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, I have a last question. Given that we contract out to other communities for fire and ambulance services, and many of our surrounding communities are currently contracted with the sheriff, do you think that there's a possibility that, I mean, obviously we're short on staff, but like, do you see that there's a possibility that maybe Pomfret needs police services or Bridgewater needs services, and that's somewhere where we could increase revenue?
I was approached by one town,
Okay.
Heartland. It's a good idea. The concern I had, besides the fact that it was when we were extremely understaffed and we didn't have the bandwidth, is they want 20 to 40 hours of patrol, so maybe like a half a person.
Yeah.
But they want 24/7 coverage, and so that would really drain our resources. If they wanted 80 hours a week of coverage to hire 2 people with 24 coverage, there's not as much overlap. I think that would be a good option, but the towns are trying to save their own money. But I didn't think it would be to our benefit to do at this juncture. It's something I'd be curious about in a year or so if circumstances change.
If I could just hop in here, this is one of the things too, where I talked about last week. It may be a place where the town has to put investment in first before we see revenue and a profit down the road. So we may have to hire 2, 3, 4 officers, put them through the whole academy. And then in 3, 4 years, we'd see the benefit of the profit as we place them in other communities. Because we'd have to hire a few officers right at the jump to get that. And right now, getting officers is difficult enough, so.
Right.
Are they currently contracted with somebody, or is it they're just short?
They're currently contracted with the sheriffs and or state police.
Okay.
They were just looking at their different options and talking to us in Windsor and Hartford.
Got it.
I think they were staying for the time being with the sheriffs, but.
Thanks, Chief. We'll go dispatch next. Want to introduce yourself? I'm not sure if anyone has the pleasure of meeting you.
Probably not ever. Beth, I am the dispatch supervisor. We're currently 4 full-time dispatchers. That's including myself. I work and supervise. I have 1 part-timer that can work occasional Saturdays, and then another part-timer who was actually going to be one of my full-timers, and I really wanted to keep her, but Rutland offered her more money and it was closer to home. 3 of my employees, myself and 2 others, drive an hour to come to work because we can't afford to live here. And it's super hard to find anybody who can dispatch and do a good job. Haley, that was the girl that I just had. And I do all the training for the position. I don't have anybody that can train. So basically I'm putting in all the hours, man hours, making sure that they're qualified to do the job. She was really good. I really love Haley. I want her to come back, but she will work for me part-time as needed. So basically I'm looking to do at least 1 more full-time person. We do work 12-hour rotating shifts because there's only 4 of us full-time. So that is a shift that actually fits us, or a schedule, I should say, that fits us. So I have 2 midnight people and 2 day shift people. If either one of us take time off, I have to backfill either myself for Lisa or Lisa for me. And same thing on midnight shifts. So, yeah, I would like to have more dispatch employees. Training is another thing. The only issue with training dispatchers is because we're not a state entity, which I worked for the state for 16 years. We had a requirement of this amount of training for this amount of time, and they provided it for us. So now I have to rely upon the state to provide it. There's one class coming up. It's like a $350 class in September. I can send one dispatcher because I don't have the training budget for it. So I kind of have to make my own stuff. You wanted to know about the dispatch program. So the state of Vermont, Department of Public Safety, the commissioner decided this was a program that was going to work for everybody, because he invented it. He's not making any money off it though, because he sold it to his wife, so it's fine. But it is one of the worst programs ever. And like Joe said, we are looking at trying to buy in with Hartford, because they use Spillman, which was the program that the state used for a long time before the commissioner decided Valcor would be the one. And of course, now he no longer works for the state because he's made his money and he ran away. That's what I got to say about that program. I'm a little bitter. So yeah, we're looking at that. That would probably help out most stuff. It's an easier program to use than the one that they've given us to use. Well, any other questions?
I just want to make one comment, with the employee they're talking about who left for Rutland, that was an example of Joe and Beth finding someone young, and then having a plan in place for someone who's gonna retire shortly. And so there'll be the next step up, and got them in, and then they got offered more money closer to home, and so they left. But even when we do the right thing and find someone young and get them ready and have a plan in place, we can't control the fact that someone's paying more money than us right now, or that they can't live near Woodstock, so they're going back to where they live.
And the thing with Rutland City, which is where she's dispatching now, they only dispatch Rutland City. That's it. They do Rutland City Police, Rutland City Fire. Yes, Rutland City has more going on with it. I understand that. I live over that way, so I know. But we dispatch for far more departments, and my people start at $18 an hour. So I make more than that at my part-time job, which is a grocery store. It's pretty sad when you make more money than dispatchers at a grocery store. What's that?
The same,
Same as the
Okay.
fire, yeah, 2025, when our new one should go out. But
I'm just curious, since my first time doing this, how long have we needed 24-hour dispatch, or how long have we offered 24-hour dispatch?
24-hour dispatching has been a thing in Woodstock since before I even got here.
Okay.
I don't know, Joe?
I would say probably.
Okay. I'm just asking because I think that there's maybe a perception that we don't, like nothing happens here.
Oh, something does happen here all the time, and that's the thing. A lot of people don't realize that there is stuff going on. We'll take calls in the morning time, and people will be like, "Oh, this happened last night at 3 a.m. Why didn't you call at 3 a.m?" Well, I didn't know you were there. We are there 24/7. We are there, and yeah, I don't know, but it's been like that. And it's definitely necessary because,
As someone who has called that line in the middle of the night, very grateful.
I mean, if you don't, fire an ambulance, they could go out anytime. So there has to be somebody there to answer the phones to send them at any time. And he is one of my midnight shift people is one of the ones that will probably retire soon. But, he's a reliable, comes to work. I actually have to say, take a night off, go to the doctors, you need to go. because he just doesn't, he won't, he'll come to work. So,
Other questions?
Once you identify different software, what is the process for, I mean, is that like a months-long process to transition things over?
I don't know as far as like, I mean, I don't, if we go into the software that Hartford is using, it's actually software that we used previously. They just built other stuff in it. So they have a different license through that company. And I don't, it would just be like, we would buy a license and download this stuff and done. Because all of our information is already built into that system. The entire state of Vermont is already built into that system because that was the one that they used before. This new system, we actually are building ourselves, basically. And even though it's been around since like 2000, it hasn't worked since 2000. It's like using Windows Vista. That's literally all I can say. It is literally like Windows Vista. One of the most horrible programs ever. And we're building it from the ground up. And every time I'm like, why does Woodstock not have any roads? I can put a road, Pleasant Street. I can put Pleasant Street in and a house number every single time, and it will not acknowledge that that road exists in Woodstock. And then when I send email, I don't get response. So it's just a horrible system.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's go with the finance.
Hello, everyone. Robert Densmore, Director of Finance. As you know, I'm probably the most recent hire here of our directors. So, you know, mine is more, my goals are going to be pretty much the goals I started with. So my goals for the next year is I want to create efficiencies. I want to develop, distribute, and implement policies and procedures. And part of that process is having the time to do so. As a director, we're working directors, we're working managers here. We're doing day-to-day work every single day. So having to block out a half hour to work on policies and procedures can be a challenge at times. I have created some efficiencies already. One of it is just easy process changes, like town police transfer between the town and the village. We were doing monthly transfers. It's a yearly cost. They're breaking it out over 12 transfers. There was no point in it. I'm like, we can do it all in one transfer. Let's, 1 versus 12, easy decision. And then another efficiency that we are going to be bringing on here in the next fiscal year is Paycheck software that Eric and I work together on to, go through the process of getting quotes and figuring out, is this something that would work for the town of Woodstock? I have confidence that it will be efficient for the town of Woodstock based off from they are currently in Vermont with other towns, municipalities that use NIMRIC software. It's working for them. Why wouldn't it work for us? But as I said, like my goals pretty much are the same. I just want to create the efficiencies that I can in the limited time I have to think about them, and then the policies and procedures to be able to, help with those, keep those efficiencies rolling. Going to the personnel policy, I have some statistics from my previous careers with like state of Vermont, because government is government, whether it's municipal, whether it's state. So I started with Department of Public Safety. We had an annual budget around 25 million a year, so 2.5 times or so what Woodstock has. We had 18 to 20 finance members, like at any given point. DMV, which was my last job, we had a $35 million annual budget. So about 3 times what Woodstock has for an annual budget between village, town, sewer. We had 18 to 20 members in our finance department. Woodstock, this coming year, we have about 11 million. It's like 10.7 between the 3 entities. We have 2 full-time staff, 1 part-time staff. I'm not saying we need 8. the same amount, like proportion wise. What I'm saying is, compared to other government agencies, government areas, we are behind the ball as far as staffing. With that, I think probably, like, not that I'm requesting this is just statistics, as I said. If we had another full-time staff, that would bring us closer. That would allow me to have the time to look at every policy and procedure or develop these policies and procedures that will help us in times of turnover and whatnot, because the turnover is inevitable in government regardless of everything else. So how does that go into the personnel policy? Well, part of it is what we get out of the personnel policy. So when I was leaving the DMV, granted, I was like 8.5 years in, almost 9 years into my state career. I was getting 3 weeks of vacation a year. I was getting a week's worth of personal time. I was also getting 3 weeks of sick time a year. Sick time also had an unlimited cap. You wouldn't, because there was no payout at the end of your career for sick time. So once again, this policy that we're having is bringing us more in line to what I know for government is coming from the state of Vermont. Because state of Vermont, you start getting about 96 hours a year accrued annual leave. You can earn up to a week's worth of personal time in the state of Vermont, depending on how much sick time you use, it can be earned. So looking at the personnel policy, I'm looking at the holidays, I'm looking at the annual leave, I'm looking at the personal time. And I'm saying we're working towards what I have seen. I haven't had a chance to really look into other towns because I've been focused on Woodstock and trying to make Woodstock, trying to keep us going and trying to make these efficient. So I haven't had the time to necessarily research similar towns. I'm from Randolph, so Randolph is where I typically go when I'm looking at things. One thing I have noticed is some of the changes in the personnel policy to me seem to make sense as far as all the union contracts have Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but the personnel policy right now does not. So in a situation like that, we would have Eric, myself, Stephen, and any elected official working on that day. But anybody as part of a union has it as a holiday. So this past year, I think we ended up closing town hall because we're only going to have, like I said, those positions working versus, having the entire staff work. The pay and finance, so the state of Vermont, the way that works, I know I'm going back to the state a lot. I know we're not the state. I understand that. I'm just going into if we're going to do an AR specialist, so that would be a financial specialist 3 with the state. Similar job duties. That would be a pay grade 21. You're starting right around $21 an hour. I'd have to look at the contract. I can get that information to all of you if you need it. But that would be the baseline for probationary period. First 6 months would be right around that level, and you get raises after 6 months and then a year, and it's the normal step process which you have here. I think overall that my time in Woodstock has been, like I said, it's almost like chasing your tail. You end up getting a lot of rabbit holes because I find myself finding something, digging, and I have to get better myself at just focusing on the task at hand and not going further and further. But overall, I think we are headed in the right direction with this personnel policy. And, I think it will be a good move as far as retention and to just be able to somewhat compete with the existing governmental employees and, try to keep people here in Woodstock.
Thank you. Questions?
What have been, since you started, what have been the biggest changes that you've made or implemented already? And then what are your goals for the next year? You talked about just efficiencies and policies and procedures, but what's your top 3 list?
Robert, can you just keep it short? We're running short on time.
Okay,
Please.
top 3. So top three, we have created like an AP policy. I would like to get more into like the payroll, like once we get a payroll policy. Being able to just have something written down. Look at our AP and AR and try to create policy.
AP.
Accounts payable, sorry. I speak in acronyms. Accounts receivable, accounts payable. Look at the processes there, try to develop a procedure and a policy that, you know, allow us to cross-train our employees. So then we're, you know, we're prepared for any sort of transition between if staff decides to go on to bigger and better things. And, you know, that's kind of the main goal there. As far as efficiencies, like we have looked into other software. I don't believe we plan on requesting this next fiscal for any new software. But we have looked into other software that would make us more efficient, allow us time to be able to, you know, do more of the high level work, look for grants and, you know, do what's better for Woodstock by getting us more state funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning and zoning?
Yes, I did make a PowerPoint. Hey, Nikki, could you allow me to share? Please?
Should be good.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Stephen Bauer, Director of Planning and Zoning. That's me. Okay, I'll apologize in advance. Like Robert mentioned, we don't have a lot of time to work on these sort of presentations. So I don't have this memorized like I would like to. So goals for the year. Future of Woodstock depends on how well we plan it. Three main goals for the year is rebrand, remodel, and remain relevant. That's what I care about. So how do we do that? One way, rebrand. So one of the ideas is to rename the department. I would say the modern era calls for it. I think part of that is remove zoning from the department title. Primarily only in New England and especially more specifically Vermont, do we retain the name planning and zoning. Well, why? Because zoning is historically synonymous with the legal justification of segregation of race by land use regulation. So that is something that we should get away from in general. In Woodstock specific, our zoning bylaws have purposely limited and outright banned development beyond the micro scale. What that means is that we've created a Woodstock that restricts our incoming tax base to pretty much the top 3% of income. People mentioned earlier, we don't pay enough. I think David is being nice by saying that retaining employees, if we had housing available that they could live in, I think that would be a huge help. So part of this is to rebrand exactly how we do things, and part of that is not only the name but also how we review through a unified development code. Also, if you guys are watching, H 687 that was vetoed by the governor had enough votes from both chambers to override yesterday, and so we've got a lot of work to do. This is just a little bit. If you see the bullet points down at the bottom, those are things we need to just add in order to take advantage of where that development is coming from. That takes a lot of hours and a lot of work and a lot of prep. So next, going into that remodel, a consolidation of the boards. Currently we have 6 boards the department staff oversees. You'll see down at the bottom where it is bolded. Those are the surprising numbers. I alone have attended 158 meetings in the last 2 fiscal years. That's totaling 300 hours of in-meeting. If you remember, Stephanie has only came on for the last fiscal year of that. So a lot of that is just me. 300 hours, and that's just including sitting in the chair like we are now. So we've calculated, between Stephanie and I, in the last 2 fiscal years, approximately 1,450 hours. Prepping, following up, writing decisions, doing minutes. So what does that mean? It means that right now, for these meetings, it costs about $127 per hour to staff these meetings. Meaning, if I wasn't a salaried employee, working well beyond my allotted hours that we budget for, we would be spending about $44,000 just to have me sit in the chair and run a meeting. So that seems like a big number. What this also means is nearly 44% of the department's budgeted staff hours is spent preparing for, attending, or writing decisions for these meetings. Some meetings are absolutely necessary. However, I predict that 15% of these meetings, only 15% have actually changed or amended any sort of application or any sort of outcome of approval or denial of the application. Less than 10% of the time does an abutting neighbor or person of the public that is generally interested in it attend. More than 95% of the times, the board approves the application as presented. So my question: how much of that process is really needed? So some ideas that we'll throw out, and I'll run through these. So I think that a lot of these boards are necessary. We're just using them in the wrong way. We're using them in the development process rather than creating plan, policy, and shaping a development code. So one of the things I would combine to have one development review board. So the village and town have one development review board. I would create Woodstock Designing. Right now we have 2 design review boards, one for South Woodstock, one for the village. Combine that. If you have the ability to go through and write the criteria, rather than have them in the review process, I would advise that they actually fall under the Planning Commission as an advisory board to the Planning Commission. We focus them on shaping the policies of what we want the design to look like. The last time they were really looked at was when they were created in 1985. And so we haven't really touched those. Same with the Conservation Commission. We can better use them as a way to rewrite our natural resources and our conservation policies. Further, we go into the new part. When you have the EDC, the Finance Committee, the Parks, the Historic Preservation, all of those. The oversight is essentially when they come to you and ask for money. That's about it. And so how do we know that they're within line with what we're doing, these goals that we're setting now? I think that's another way that we could help out. So the next part, remain relevant. So part of this is just simply, we're competing with other tour-based economies, not only for retaining locals, but also bringing in dollars from elsewhere. So to properly compete, we need a department that's dedicated to finding this balance and searching for this balance and understanding what it is we need. Quite frankly, just planning requires redirecting resources, time, and money to these things. Perfect example is often people mention that when they have a desire to put in a new restaurant, neighbors are quick to mention that dozens of reasons of why it won't get approved, whether that be water, wastewater, permitting, whatever. Sometimes the myth is true and sometimes they aren't. I see that as a problem. If we want restaurants, we should figure out a way to allow that to happen. Same as multifamily developments and other commercial ventures. So finally, the biggest part of all of this is growth. The big goal for planning and zoning going forward in this next year is really understanding growth. Why? Because the legislature is telling us you have a pathway. They're paving the pathway to say, go do that. Part of the ways that we want to do that is these things that I list here. Creating a master plan, creating the unified development code. We've got to get a capital investment plan because we don't know. We've got 2 things right now, water and wastewater in the village. What are we doing with those and how much are we investing and what is our plan for that? How quickly? Private public partnerships and asset management. We have things that we currently own that we don't know how much their value is. We have an assessed value from the listers. That's about it. What do we want to do with them? Do we want to keep them? Town hall, do we want to keep it? What do we want to do with it? The village garage, do we want to keep it? What is the best use of those assets? So I would say also, and when talking about growth, there's always a pain point there. I'll say Woodstock in Vermont has not had a major period of population growth really since this counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s. So when we're talking about a development plan, we say, what do we want to be when we grow up? That's what we're really looking at. And I think it's time that we do. So last slide, we'll move on, is what do we need? What does the department need from you all when going through this process? I'd say staffing, technology, and support from you. So staffing, the department could hire right now one full-time employee, and we would still not get to every question and every need that everyone has. So we need a modern personnel policy that when we start adding staff and retaining staff, we need to be able to do that. Let's say even the proposed personnel policy, which is objectively better than the current policy, it still provides no parental leave or dependent care reimbursement. Those are things that families are looking to move here, that where they're coming from, it's an absolute standard. It also doesn't adequately address or provide for remote or hybrid work. I mean, post-COVID, that is part of the modern worker, what they're looking for. So I agree that a step forward is a step forward, but I encourage the boards, whether we look at that now or possibly even look at it after we pass what is currently proposed, is something that we use as a recruiting tool. I would say for technology, does anyone remember Windows 98? So that's about the same time that our file creation or file permit software that we use every day. I bet none of you think about Windows 98 when you think about how is that permit that I'm receiving from Stephen, what was that created on? It was about a program just like that. So just new technology. And finally, support, again, from you all. Amending regulations, consolidation, changing maps, consolidating boards, adding staff, adopting policies to help recruit, retain employees, all of those things, they all require your support, because there is that fraction of the population who favors exclusionary zoning because it has helped them. It has been used as a tool to protect their self-interest, and they've chosen that over the betterment of Woodstock. That's the policy, that is the structure, that is what we have inherited, and we need to take a step away from that. So the department needs your support. Just yesterday, the legislature overrode that veto. How are we going to use that? We need to have a plan for how we're going to use that. And I say it's time for Woodstock to reban, remodel, and figure out a way to remain relevant. Thanks.
Can you send this down?
I can.
I know there's a question. We have 6 minutes left. It's okay if we have the town clerk come up, discuss, and then if there's questions, the time for Stephen or the clerk after would be okay. All right. Thank you, Stephen. Charlie.
Keep this brief. I really didn't have a lot that I needed to present to you anyhow. We're just sort of, keeping a steady course down in our office. We don't have a large department with a lot of equipment and a lot of personnel expenses. There are 3 in the office, myself, Mary Riley, and Carol Wood. For slightly over 2 full-time positions, we have about 45 hours of the assistant clerk and 40 hours of the clerk. So we have 3 people, but a staffing level of essentially 2. The personnel policy seems reasonable to me. I think one of the big points that I would reiterate that was made earlier, when I started working for the town, we had no unions. And I think as the unions have come in, it's created different inequities. Some people have some holidays, some people don't have those holidays. And it seems that this personnel policy is trying to get us back on a more even keel and be more equitable across the board. So I appreciate that. I'm not sure if anybody has any specific questions. The one big ask, I guess, for our department, we have 2 computers, and the newest one is from 2015. So in the coming fiscal year, I think we're going to need a couple computers, but that's the big expense and equipment that we're looking for. So I'm not sure if anyone has any questions for me, or maybe some questions for Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for plan and zoning? No, we have about 3 minutes. Or we want to take a quick break before the select board meeting? Okay.
Is there any other business to come before the trustees tonight? Okay, well, or were you guys not gonna adjourn? You're just gonna roll-
well, take a break. After adjourn it, right?
You have to go into order though, it's on your thing.
Anyway, maybe best if you just end and then start again.
Okay. Any business?
No. I make a motion for the trustees to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Aye.
Thank
Thank you, trustees.
you. Have fun, guys.